Everyone knows Mount Fuji. Its perfect shape has become one of the most recognizable symbols of Japan. Today, millions of people photograph it, climb it, and see it from trains, cities, and observation decks. But 200 years ago, a mountain could mean something more. In the religious traditions and stories of Edo-period Japan, mountains could be places of training, danger, sacred power, and encounters with beings outside ordinary human society. And one strange old record gives us a glimpse of that hidden geography. The record is known as Senkyo Ibun. It was compiled in the early 19th century by the Japanese scholar Hirata Atsutane. Atane questioned a boy named Torakichi, who claimed that he had traveled through mysterious mountains, with beings usually described as mountain people, ascetics, or Tengu. Torakichi described their lives in remarkable detail, and Atsutane kept asking questions. One of those conversations began with a simple question. What was the difference between a senin and a yamabito? The word senin is often translated as immortal or hermit. It comes from a long tradition, connected with China, and describes extraordinary beings who had withdrawn from ordinary human society. Torakichi gave a surprisingly simple explanation. According to him, beings called senin in China were called yamabito, or mountain people, in Japan. Then Atsutane remembered a story he had heard. A mysterious mountain figure called Josho had once appeared in Shimosa province, in the region east of Edo. Atsutane understood that this figure was associated with Mount Fuji, so he asked Torakichi about him. Torakichi corrected him. According to the record, Josho was not a mountain man of Mount Fuji. He was connected with Mount Oyama. Mount Oyama is in present-day Kanagawa prefecture, not far from Edo. It had long been a major place of mountain worship and pilgrimage. This may seem like a tiny detail, but it tells us something important about the conversation between Atsutane and Torakichi. Torakichi did not simply agree with the adult scholar. He gave his own geography of the hidden world. Mount Fuji? No, Mount Oyama. And Atsutane did something equally interesting. He checked the story again. The additional information made the situation more complicated. Josho was said to have served the deity of Mount Oyama, but he was also said to have later withdrawn to an area near the foot of Mount Fuji. So the connection with Fuji may not have been completely wrong. The story had simply become confused. Who was Josho? A religious ascetic? A traveler? A legendary mountain figure? Or someone whose story changed as people repeated it? We cannot know. But the conversation reveals something larger. Mount Fuji was not the only mountain connected with stories of mysterious beings. Atsutane asked Torakichi about famous sacred mountains across Japan. Mount Kurama near Kyoto, Mount Atago, Mount Izuna, Mount Tsukuba in eastern Japan, Mount Hiei, Mount Hiko in Kyushu, Mount Daisen in western Japan, and others. Old traditions associated some of these mountains with famous Tengu and mountain beings. Mount Kurama, for example, was associated with the great Tengu Sojobo. Mount Atago was associated with Torobo. Other mountains had their own named beings and traditions. But Atsutane was not simply teaching Torakichi a list of legends. He wanted to know what the boy himself thought about them. Did Torakichi recognize these names? Were these beings the same as the mountain people he claimed to know? Were the stories in old books correct? In this way, the conversation began to create a second map of Japan. The first map was physical: mountains, villages, roads, provinces. The second was invisible: sacred mountains, Tengu, mountain ascetics, hidden inhabitants, places where the ordinary world seemed to touch another one. For a modern viewer, Mount Fuji is completely mapped. We know its height. We know its geology. We can see satellite images of its slopes. We can watch live cameras pointed at it 24 hours a day. But the people of Edo, Japan, did not experience mountains through satellites and digital maps. A distant mountain could still contain areas that few people had ever seen. Fog could hide an entire slope. A traveler could disappear along a mountain path. Ascetics lived and trained far from ordinary settlements. Stories grew around such places. That does not mean everyone in Edo. Japan literally believed that invisible beings lived inside Mount Fuji. Senkyo Ibun should not be treated as a simple record of what all Japanese people believed. It is something stranger and more specific. It records the questions of one unusual scholar and the answers of one unusual boy. But through their conversation, we can see how geography, religion, folklore, memory, and imagination could overlap. Mount Fuji could be a real mountain. It could also be a sacred mountain. And in stories of hidden beings, it could become part of another landscape layered over ordinary Japan. This is what makes Atsutane's method so fascinating. He did not only ask about miracles. He asked for names. He asked for places. He compared stories. And when Torakichi disagreed with information, Atsutane had already heard. Atsutane tried to check it. Nearly 2 centuries later, we still cannot know what Torakichi actually experienced. Perhaps he believed everything he described. Perhaps dreams, memories, religious traditions, stories, and imagination became mixed together. Perhaps some of the mountain figures in these stories were inspired by real ascetics and travelers. There is no simple answer, but there is another way to look at the record. It preserves a glimpse of a Japan that existed not only on maps, but in the imagination, a Japan of sacred mountains and hidden paths. And Mount Fuji was only one part of it. Today, when we look at Mount Fuji, we may ask, how high is it? When did it last erupt? How can we climb it? But 200 years ago, another question could still linger in the mist. Who might be living there? And what begins beyond the point, where the ordinary road disappears into the mountains? That is the hidden Japan preserved in Torakichi's strange story.